procedures and advise them accordingly. But for the community, we are looking at the establishment where they stay and advise the establishment owner to identify the employees that have been in contact with the patient and from there do the mandatory quarantine to observe them if ever they will manifest any signs and symptoms of respiratory infection. Next question.
Yeah.
Do we know, sir, what the purpose of the travel to the Philippines is? Is it for tourism or are they working tourism? Just for Dr. Mabea's case, an Australian news site has published statistics and it indicated that the Philippines has 4 cases. Do you have any idea on this, sir? And you're citing the World Health Organization. Perhaps they may have some sort of advance info that we don't have.
I'm surprised because we don't have that information either. We don't know how they arrived at that estimate. As you know, estimates are only estimates. We don't know what basis they use for arriving at the estimate. We don't certainly have that information. As the Secretary mentioned, there are many patients that are considered PUIs, in fact 29, but only one of those have been confirmed. Many others have been excluded because the tests have come negative. So I have no information as to how this institute arrived at this estimate.
Dr. Yaki, do we have additional information about the novel coronavirus? Is it a mild virus or what's the survival rate at this point?
So we are reiterating the most recent numbers issued by our headquarters last evening was 6,065 cases reported to WHO with 132 deaths. More recently this morning, the Chinese have reported further increases in numbers and deaths, which have not yet, I believe, been reported to WHO. But among all of these cases, as you see, there's only 132 deaths that have been reported. If you're looking at the mortality rate, you're talking of less than 3% deaths. This is much lower than previous coronavirus infections, just so that we look at it from a realistic perspective.
Yes, at the back.
To Dr. Rankin, sir, the WHO officials at your headquarters will be meeting today to discuss the global health emergency declaration. If indeed they declare the global health emergency or NOE, what does that entail? What are the implications?
So you're correct. The DG has asked for a reconvening of the emergency committee of the international health regulations that will be relooking at the novel coronavirus situation. Part of this is because of the increased number of cases that are being reported in China, but also increasingly beyond China. I believe we have now confirmed cases from 15 other countries. So this changes the situation from the time the committee met on the last occasion on the 23rd, and they will be looking at whether this current situation and the evidence and knowledge that has been gained since the last meeting now constitutes enough evidence to classify this event as a public health emergency of international concern. Let me explain that. What would that mean? If WHO then decides to classify this as an international emergency, a public health emergency of international concern, it would then mean that we would work with member states to actively stop the transmission of this virus, and that may include restrictions that are agreed with member states to facilitate that process. What those restrictions are, we cannot tell, and that will be based on the risk assessment and the conclusions that the committee reaches this evening. But the aim of the declaration is to prevent the further spread of this disease and to control it as early as possible.
Question?
Dr. Rafi, the number of cases already exceeded the number during the SARS virus has infected people in mainland China. Does this mean that it is more, it is the infectivity rate of circulating and moving is more infectious than of SARS?
So the reproductive rate, the number that we look at to define the infectivity of an infection, in this case is lower than for SARS. The numbers have improved, reflecting the increased preparedness and readiness of the Chinese and the early start to the testing of people. So we have to look at it in that context and not purely compare numbers, right? We are talking 17 years later, enhanced preparedness and capacities, and larger population. So we would have expected to see more numbers. That doesn't actually mean that this infection probably is more infectious than SARS. The numbers that we have currently does not support that.
I have a question here.
Okay, for Sec Dugan and Dr. Ab, I think with the confirmation of the case now, people will clamor more for a travel ban. Can you spell out for us why it isn't the right decision to make now? What are the economic repercussions, the labor repercussions like you said that we will?
Well, that has obviously changed by now, and that is why I will strongly recommend to the task force, the Emerging Infectious Disease Task Force, of whose members that I already enumerated, a temporary restriction of travelers from the entire Hubei province of China. But I believe that will still change. It could expand the number or increase the number of places depending on the assessment that is going to be done by the WHO. So we will be waiting for the assessment of the WHO and recommendation whether to add to the list some more places with a relatively higher burden of nCoV infection. Okay, so this is going to be dynamic.
Secretary Duque, we'll be seeing more of these panic people, paranoia. Advice po, are there specific guidelines if ever they feel symptoms or they have a family member who experiences symptoms? What should they be doing instead of panicking?
Yes, well, that is assuming they haven't traveled to any of the affected places in China. So you and I, it's the season of flu. Every now and then we develop coughs, colds, slight fever, weakness, body malaise, etc. And what I have been saying is to make sure that we should be very conscious about personal hygiene, such as washing of the hands for 20 seconds, palm and at the back of the hands and the digits, make that 20 seconds, and we recommend as often as you can. If not, if you have alcohol, you apply alcohol on your hands, on your palms, and then the cough etiquette, the maintaining the distance of not less than 1 meter apart from the next guy in front, at the back, or at your side. And the hydration, drinking a lot of water, because as I have read yesterday in some articles, it appears that the virus will be difficult to inactivate in low temperatures and low humidity or dry. dry atmosphere. So having said that, therefore I strongly recommend as your doctor that you have to drink a lot of water, make sure your throat is moist so that the virus doesn't attach to it and gets eventually absorbed. And then of course the intake of nutritious food stuff rich in vitamins A, C, D, E, and also mineral zinc. You can get that included in the multivitamins that you take. Instead of iron, you deliberately point out to those that need zinc because that's been proven to protect the throat. Drink a lot of fruit juices rich in vitamin C. Eat put malunggay in many of your soup or other food stuff, and avoid crowded places as much as possible. And if you are feeling any of the symptoms I have just mentioned, do wear a surgical mask. It's going to help prevent the spread of whatever virus you have. This is not just talking about nCoV, but you have alpha influenza virus, you have the beta influenza virus, you have the Streptococcus pneumoniae, you have the Haemophilus influenza, and also even some opportunistic microorganisms. Because if your resistance is weak, then even the ubiquitous organisms that we breathe every now and then will tend to cause disease in people with very poor immunity.
We'll take two more questions.
Sir, yun lang po detalye sana ng na-confirm natin case. Ito po ba yung kasama dun sa pinigil sa Hong Kong? Tapos po nakapasok po sa Pilipinas.
Yung unang naibalita na grupo ng Chinese national na nagaling sa Hong Kong, iba ito.
Last question.
Can we get an update on San Lazaro Hospital? How are the PUIs there?
You can ask the director of San Lazaro later. Question, please.
Sir, additional information about the patients.